This is a definition, my personal definition of conviction. Deep-seated belief in your product or service to get another person to a better state in their life. Where would that conviction come from? Right? This morning I was reading the book of Peter. It talks about Peter had a burden. He had a burden so strong that he had to go, because people were coming into the church spreading misinformation. He had such a burden, he had to go talk about this. It talks about what is planted inside you. That belief and conviction is planted inside you. So if it's planted inside of you for you, how do you uncover it? How do you uncover it? Because in my opinion, everybody's field in here is so competitive that the people that win the most have the most conviction. It's just that simple. So what does that mean? They're willing to promote like nobody else promotes. They're willing to go the distance. They're willing to challenge prospects. They're willing to ask for sales. They're willing to do whatever it takes because their conviction is so strong. Now, one place of conviction is because of the results that you get. When you consistently get results for people, it's going to drive more and more and more and more conviction in you. Okay? So you're really selling results. But I see so many people that try to sell and they're just lukewarm, man. They're lukewarm. They got no passion and enthusiasm for what they're selling. Their voice is monotone. They're just going through the motions, and you're not going to sell at a high level like that. So when you think about this story, I want you thinking about this. This is where I think conviction comes from. Okay? And this is where we're going to work through with your story. Conviction starts by first having some big revelation. Okay? Now, my revelation looks like this. I was raised by a single mother who had me when she was 16 years old. My dad was 18, my mom was 16. They married for 1 year, I think primarily because my grandfather told them they were going to get married. They divorced within a year of me being born. I have no recollection of any of that. All I do remember is us living in a house where the living room and the kitchen and the bedroom were all the same room. And it was me and my mother, which is why we have such a close relationship. And I remember watching that woman scratch and claw for everything she had. She worked during the day, and at night she worked. She was a nurse at Vanderbilt Hospital in the emergency room. And if you've ever worked in an emergency room, it's a tough place to work, especially at night, especially in Nashville. So she was gone a lot. I stayed with grandparents, I stayed with aunts and uncles, but one of the places I went a lot was I would go down to the local baseball field, and I would stay at the local baseball field for hours and hours and hours. I'm talking like get down there in the afternoon and stay till the end of the day. Here's where my revelation took place. I watched coaches tend to other people's kids. I watched how they cared about them. I watched how they fed them. I watched how they loved on them. And it was really a woman coach named Mickey Vincent at 6 years old that said, son, one of these days, you're going to be a great coach. Now, 36 years later, what am I doing for a living? How deep do you think my conviction is? From living that from 6 years old to today. So when you tell me, oh, I don't need a coach. Oh, I'm already pretty good. Oh, I don't have the time. I don't have the money. I don't have this. My conviction is so strong, I'm going to come right back at you. And I'm going to challenge you. And I'm going to say, why would you even try to go at this on your own? You are a smart person, and you are going to figure this out. But what if I could help you figure it out a whole lot faster? And the best people in the world have a coach. And trained people always outperform untrained people. You understand what I'm saying? I'm just going to keep coming back at you. And where does that come from? My revelation that a coach can change everything for you. Now, when you're telling, this is where some of the vulnerability comes in, because it's very hard for me for many years to even tell you that story I just told you. I wouldn't tell it. I wouldn't talk about any failures I had. I wouldn't talk about any place of vulnerability that I had. And I really didn't start within the last year, and I've had media coaching. And my media coaches always told me the same thing. The only thing keeping you from being a big-time person is you will not become vulnerable with your audience. You won't tell the bad. So they're like, people see you as a machine that doesn't have any feelings, that don't ever struggle with anything. And that's not true, coach. So you got to learn to tell the whole story. And so about a year and a half ago, I started just being more authentic and more real and saying, listen, this is where I failed. This is where I can get better. Okay? And this is where it started to change for me, because when you get that, you can relate to a lot of people when they know you've gone through that struggle. Now, we just came back from a retreat with Hugh Freeze, who's the former head coach at Ole Miss, who lost his job at Ole Miss. who was one of the top college football coaches in the country. He beat Nick Saban twice. He scored 45 points on Alabama back-to-back years. Okay? And let me tell you something. That dude was so real and so authentic, and he told the whole story. If you follow the story in the media, here's what I did. Here's what it cost me. Here's the shame it caused me. Here's how I lost my job at Ole Miss. Here's how I embarrassed my kids and my wife. Okay? And let me tell you what I've learned from that experience. I learned this, and because of that, let me tell you where I am today. And man, it was so real that everybody there was like, dang, he's the real deal. Like no matter what you read in the media about him, he's the real deal. Okay? While we were there, almost every major college in the country was calling him. His agent was constantly calling him. He is in demand. He's going to be able to say wherever he wants to go because at the end of the day, he's the real deal. Okay? Now, how much guts does it take to tell a complete group of strangers that? Right? It takes a lot of guts. But I went down there kind of as a fan of his, like thinking like this dude's cool, and I walked out there thinking, man, I love this guy. I would go to bat for this guy. So part of telling your story when you're trying to sell is understanding this, what's called a story of origin. And a story of origin is a key part of your life that really opened your eyes to something really big. Okay, like me telling a story at 6 years old, the Little League baseball coach, and at 15 I was a junior pro basketball coach, and at 18 I started coaching, at 19 I went to Riverdale. These are very important stories, and when I'm trying to sell another person or convince them, look, I am qualified to get you to a better place. And let me tell you why. So the first step is, man, I had a big revelation somewhere along the way. And because of that revelation, I now have conviction. And because of my conviction, I am now willing to do whatever it takes. Okay? And somewhere along the way, having that. Now, that's a whole lot better than selling whatever it is you sell every day, but connecting to another person's heart about why you do what you do every day. And yesterday we had a guy in Cool Springs who got up and kind of shared his conviction, and his parents, he was an insurance guy, PNC insurance guy, and his parents got into a really bad car wreck, and they were not insured like they should have been. And he told the whole story of getting a phone call, going to the hospital, they almost die, they're not insured like they're supposed to, and he's like, I never want another person to go through that forever, right? Now, he can sit down and tell that story to a person who goes, well, I don't really need that much insurance, or I don't need this, or I don't need that. He can look them right in the eye and say, let me tell you why you need this, because I personally experienced it. That's conviction. Does that make sense? And they may go, you're right, I do need this. Okay, so for you, until we have some of these things in place, we're really just out there pumping products and services, and they're commodities. So talk about, at your table, what's some of the big revelation that you've had. Some of you got into your career because of this revelation. Right? Like we're doing stuff for kids now. I got this Kids Academy, Monster Growth Online Academy, and I'm teaching Bounce Back, how to find your talent, how to lead, how to show up, right? These are things that we know your kids are not learning in school. And let me tell you something. I fought this for years, but every morning I woke up, just like Peter said, a burden was on my heart. You're supposed to do something for kids. So every day I would go, no, I don't want to do it. No, I don't want to do it. No, I don't want to do it. And then finally one day I said, man, I'm going to quit fighting this. Apparently the good Lord's telling me I need to do this. So now we've got a whole division. Chelsea is running that division for us. She's out there trying to sell it. And one thing we're doing is we're getting sponsors. Sponsors are paying for schools, for entire schools to get the Kids Academy. And they need it. Because I asked my daughter goes to private Christian school, Middle Tennessee Christian, and I asked the principal, where's she going to learn how to bounce back? What class does she learn how to find her talents? How does she learn how to overcome rejection? How does she learn to show up every day? And he's like, we don't have a class on that. And I'm like, well, that's what I want her to know. I want her to be able to walk into any room, any place, anywhere, and be perfectly confident that she can handle this. And I think it's great you're teaching everything else, but this is what I really want her to know. And so they bought my online academy, and they good because they need it. So they're going to use it for their kids to make sure the kids get it, which is very critical. So I've got a conviction about this, right? Because I know what a good coach can do for a kid. I know how important it is because, I had a kid that came to Riverdale when I was coaching, and she had to ride in a taxi cab in the morning to school because her parents wouldn't bring her. Do you know how degrading that is to ride in a taxi cab to show up in front of all your friends? Because your parents won't bring you to school. And she had to work to have the money to ride the taxi. I used to take kids out that parents wouldn't teach them how to drive, and I would teach them how to drive in the parking lot in my own car. That's scary. But I would say, have your parents help you learn how to drive? You know, I know you got to get your driver's license. They'd say, nope. And I'd say, at the end of the day today, when everybody's gone, we're going to get out here and we're going to practice in the parking lot. Okay? And we're going to teach you how to drive, because you're going to have to know how to do this. That's what good coaches do. Okay? So I've got this conviction about me, about why you need a person in your life who will challenge you some and have these conversations. So I don't have a problem telling these stories. Okay? So for you, what's your big revelation? Because of that, where's your conviction? Because your conviction, where's your action? Okay? So walk through that right now, this cycle that's on the board. Okay?